I can still hear the applause echoing in that gymnasium. It was the kind of sound that swells and fills every corner, except, somehow, the one where I was sitting. My hands were clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles turned white. My son, Daniel, sat 3 rows ahead of me, in his blue graduation gown, fidgeting with the tassel on his cap. He looked so small, even at 18. Small and terribly alone. While the other graduates laughed and nudged each other, Daniel sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the floor. Nobody came over to joke with him, to take a selfie, or to whisper last-minute plans for the graduation party. I noticed it all. Mothers hugging their kids, fathers clapping them on the shoulder, and us, just watching. It hadn't always been like that. Once, Daniel was popular. Teachers loved him for his manners, classmates admired his quiet confidence. But something had changed this last year. A rumor, a lie, whispered by someone powerful enough that nobody dared question it. And though Daniel never told me the full story, I saw the way he withdrew from everything: the basketball team, his best friend, even choir. The ceremony began. The principal, a tall man with a practiced smile, started calling names. One after another, the students walked across the stage, parents cheered, cameras flashed. Then came the letter M. My heart raced. Daniel's turn was coming. The principal glanced at the next card, and for a split second, his face changed. The smile faltered. His hand froze midair. He blinked, then looked again at the card, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The gym fell oddly quiet. Even the chatter in the back rows faded. The microphone crackled, and his voice, suddenly unsure, said, Daniel Miller. But it wasn't just the hesitation that caught everyone's attention. It was what came next, when the principal looked up, right into the crowd, searching for someone. For me. And in that frozen second I knew. Something about my son's name had just rewritten the entire story everyone thought they knew. Sometimes, truth waits for its moment, and when it finally speaks, it echoes louder than any applause. When the ceremony ended, people began to murmur, puzzled by what had just happened on stage. The principal had paused so long before saying Daniel's name that the entire auditorium went still. Then, after Daniel walked across the stage, awkwardly, quietly, something even stranger happened. The principal, Mr. Reeves, stepped away from the podium and shook his hand with both of his own. It wasn't the usual quick, perfunctory handshake. It was deliberate, almost reverent. The kind that says, I know something others don't. I could see the confusion ripple through the crowd. The same students who had ignored Daniel all year were whispering behind their programs. Parents leaned toward one another, speculating. But Daniel didn't notice any of it. He just bowed his head slightly, accepted the diploma, and walked back to his seat, his eyes shining but unreadable. After the ceremony, as graduates and families spilled outside into the bright afternoon, the usual chaos began: balloons, photos, proud parents calling out names. Yet, somehow, the circle around Daniel stayed empty. No one congratulated him. No one asked for a picture. I found him by the old oak tree near the parking lot. He was alone, tying and untying the ribbon on his diploma case. I tried to lighten the mood. You did it, sweetheart. He smiled faintly. Yeah, I guess I did. But before I could say anything else, Mr. Reeves approached us, his expression tense but kind. Mrs. Miller, he said, glancing at me and then at Daniel. Could I have a word? Both of you, actually. I felt a flicker of unease. Of course. He gestured toward the side of the building, where the noise of the crowd faded behind us. Then he lowered his voice. I need to ask about something I found this morning in the scholarship records. It concerns Daniel's application. Daniel stiffened. His hand tightened around the diploma case. I saw fear flash across his face, the kind that comes when you've been carrying a secret too long. Sometimes the truth doesn't destroy. It demands to be seen. Mr. Reeves' tone was gentle, but there was something urgent beneath it, something that made my stomach twist. He glanced around before continuing. When I reviewed the final scholarship reports this morning, I noticed a discrepancy in the system. There was a name missing, and a name that shouldn't have been there. His eyes softened. Daniel's. Daniel's shoulders slumped. He didn't look surprised, only resigned. I stepped in, my heart pounding. What do you mean, missing? Mr. Reeves folded his hands. Daniel had applied for the Hastings Merit Scholarship, correct? The one funded by the late Mr. Hastings Foundation? I nodded. Yes, but he didn't win. We got the rejection months ago. The principal shook his head slowly. That's the thing, Mrs. Miller. According to the Foundation's original documents, Daniel did win. His essay received the highest score, but someone in the administration replaced his name with another student's before the results were made public. I felt the world tilt. Replaced? He hesitated, then said quietly, by the son of a school board member. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The spring breeze rattled the leaves overhead. Daniel finally exhaled, almost a whisper. I knew it. I turned to him. You knew? He nodded. I saw something on the office computer one day when I was returning library books. My name had been deleted from the scholarship list. But when I tried to say something, no one believed me. Everyone thought I was just bitter. His voice broke. That's when the rumors started that I'd lied about volunteering hours, about cheating. They made me look like a fraud. Mr. Reeves looked stricken. I only discovered the error when the Foundation requested proof of payment this morning. It seems whoever changed the records forgot one crucial detail. The essay files are archived under the original author's name. I could barely breathe. My son had been humiliated for a lie he never told. Mr. Reeves took a deep breath. There's going to be an investigation. But I need your help to make things right, quietly and carefully. Sometimes integrity is tested not when you lose, but when you're asked how you'll reclaim what's rightfully yours. We followed Mr. Reeves into his office, a quiet corner room lined with plaques and old yearbooks. The afternoon sunlight came through the blinds in narrow slits, cutting across the desk where a single folder lay open. On its cover, in tidy handwriting, was my son's name, Daniel Miller. He gestured for us to sit. I printed everything the system had on file before the alteration, he said. Essay drafts, timestamps, internal notes. I think you should see this. Daniel leaned forward. His fingers trembled slightly as he flipped through the pages. There was his essay, the one he'd written late into the night at our kitchen table. I remembered the smell of cocoa, the clock ticking past midnight, his stubborn determination to get every word perfect. Mr. Reeves pointed to a digital log. This line here, see the timestamp? That's when your file was opened. 2 hours later, another entry appears. The username belongs to the assistant registrar, but I suspect someone else used her login. The edits removed your name and inserted the other students. Who? I asked, my throat dry. He hesitated. Eric Walsh. His father sits on the school board. The name hit like a cold wave. I knew Mr. Walsh, a man who liked to remind everyone of his influence, his donations, his country club membership. His son had never hidden behind modesty either. Daniel closed the folder quietly. So, what happens now? That depends, said Mr. Reeves. The Foundation will demand an explanation. But if we move too fast, the board might bury it before the truth comes out. They'll protect their own. I could see the conflict on his face. He wanted to help, but he was afraid of what it might cost him. Then he looked at Daniel. You're a good young man. But before we proceed, I need to know something. If this comes to light, it could get ugly. Are you ready for that? Daniel didn't hesitate. I just want the truth on record, even if nobody claps for me. The quiet courage in his voice made my eyes sting. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is speak softly, while the world demands we stay silent. That night, after we got home, Daniel went straight to his room. I stood by the kitchen window, staring out at the dark yard, trying to make sense of it all. The truth was finally surfacing, but it came tangled in danger. If what Mr. Reeves suspected was true, this wasn't just a clerical error. It was fraud, and someone had risked my son's future to protect their own privilege. I made tea and waited, hoping Daniel would come downstairs. When he finally did, he was holding something in his hand, a folded sheet of paper, soft from being opened and closed too many times. He set it on the table. I never told you about this, he said quietly. But I think it matters now. I unfolded the paper. It was a letter, handwritten, with the school's crest at the top. The date was from 5 months earlier. It was a congratulations letter from the Hastings Foundation, signed by the scholarship director herself. My heart skipped. Daniel, they did choose you. He nodded. It came in the mail by mistake. A week later, I got another letter saying there'd been an administrative correction. That's when everything changed. People stopped talking to me. Teachers looked at me differently. Someone must have told them I faked the letter. He sat down across from me, his eyes shining with quiet fury. I kept it because I wanted to prove I wasn't crazy. I knew the truth would show up someday. I stared at that letter, the paper slightly yellowed at the edges. Proof. A small, fragile piece of paper that could topple everything built on a lie. Mr. Reeves needs to see this, I said. But Daniel's voice was firm.
No, Mom.
The Foundation needs to see it. They deserve to know who stole from them, and who they should have honored instead. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into its envelope. For the first time in months, I saw something in my son's face that had been missing. Conviction. Sometimes justice begins not in courtrooms but in quiet rooms, with a single person deciding to stop being afraid. The next morning, Daniel woke before dawn. I heard him moving in the kitchen, making coffee, printing documents, packing his backpack. When I came downstairs, he was already dressed in a crisp white shirt, the same one he'd worn for his college interviews. His face was pale but steady. I'm taking the letter to the Hastings Foundation, he said simply. Mr. Reeves gave me their contact. I hesitated. Shouldn't he go with you? He shook his head. If I'm going to clear my name, I have to do it myself. We drove together to the city. The Foundation's office was on the 10th floor of a glass building that looked far too expensive for us to belong in. I waited in the car while Daniel went inside, clutching the envelope like a passport. Those 30 minutes felt like hours. When he finally came back out, his expression was unreadable. He slid into the passenger seat, silent for a long time. Then he said, "They believed me." I exhaled, my whole body trembling with relief. They did. He nodded. The director checked their records. My essay's ID code matched their original file. She said they'd been confused by missing data, but didn't realize it had been altered. She's opening a formal inquiry. But before we could celebrate, my phone buzzed. It was Mr. Reeves. His voice was tight. Mrs. Miller, I need to warn you. The board found out about the investigation. Mr. Walsh is furious. He's claiming Daniel hacked the system. I felt my blood run cold. That's absurd. I know, Reeves said. But they're calling an emergency meeting tomorrow. They'll try to make this go away. When I hung up, Daniel was staring out the window, his jaw set. They're not going to stop, are they? No, I said softly. But neither are we. He reached into his bag and pulled out the scarf I'd knitted him years ago, navy blue, frayed at the ends. He wrapped it loosely around his neck. Then I guess it's time they see who I really am. Sometimes courage is quiet, wrapped in something ordinary, like a worn scarf that once kept a child warm. The board meeting was held the next afternoon in the school auditorium. Parents weren't supposed to attend, but when I arrived with Daniel, no one stopped us. Maybe it was the look on his face, calm, steady, unflinching, that kept people from saying a word. At the front of the room sat Mr. Walsh, red-faced, his son Eric beside him, slouched and smug. Mr. Reeves stood to one side, papers in hand, and beside him, the Foundation director, a poised woman named Mrs. Graham, watched everything in silence. "Let's begin," said Mr. Walsh, pounding his gavel as if he were the judge of the world. "We're here to address a serious allegation of data tampering by student Daniel Miller." The words hung in the air like poison. Daniel stood. "With all due respect, sir, that's not what happened. Someone changed the records to give your son a scholarship he didn't earn." Gasps rippled through the room. Mr. Walsh sneered. "You're accusing my family of fraud? You have proof." Daniel nodded slowly. He reached into his bag and pulled out the envelope. His hands didn't shake this time. "I have the original acceptance letter from the Hastings Foundation, and the digital timestamp logs from the school server, provided by Principal Reeves. Mrs. Graham took the documents, scanning them carefully. Then she turned toward the board. These match our internal records exactly. The student who won was Daniel Miller. The scholarship funds were diverted under false pretenses. A murmur spread. Mr. Walsh went pale. This is preposterous, some clerical error. But she cut him off. No clerical error erases metadata, Mr. Walsh. This was deliberate. For a moment, the room was utterly still. Then Mr. Reeves spoke, his voice firm. I'll take full responsibility for letting this slip through. But the student deserves public recognition, not whispers. He turned to Daniel. Would you accept the Hastings Merit Scholarship now, officially? Daniel looked at me, then back at him. Only if Eric's name is cleared too. He didn't do this, his father did. That single act of grace silenced the room. Sometimes true strength isn't in winning, it's in refusing to become what hurt you. The days that followed felt like walking through the eye of a storm. News of a hearing spread fast, first among parents, then throughout the town. At first, people whispered as we passed, their faces unreadable. Then, slowly, the tone shifted. Some nodded with quiet respect. Others stopped Daniel in the hallways just to shake his hand. The Hastings Foundation released an official statement within the week. The scholarship had been rightfully restored to Daniel Miller. The announcement made the local paper, and though it wasn't headline news, it meant the world to us. What no one knew, however, was the part that mattered most, the private letter Mrs. Graham had sent afterward. She wrote, "Character is tested most in silence. We saw not only your talent, but your restraint. True merit is moral, not material." I read it 3 times before handing it to Daniel. He smiled faintly and said, "Then I guess it was worth it." Meanwhile, the investigation led to the assistant registrar's resignation, and Mr. Walsh quietly stepped down from the board for personal reasons. Eric transferred to another school district by the end of summer. He never reached out, but one day, Daniel received an anonymous note in his locker. It read simply, "I'm sorry. I didn't know what my dad had done." Daniel kept it folded inside his wallet, right behind his student ID. The night before he left for college, we stood together by that same oak tree where he'd been alone after graduation. He was taller somehow, not just in stature, but in spirit. The blue scarf was still around his neck, though frayed and faded now. "Keep it," I told him. "It's seen you through storms." He grinned. "Then maybe it's lucky." As his car pulled away, I realized that sometimes vindication doesn't roar. It hums softly in the heart, in knowing that decency still has weight in the world. Truth may take its time, but it always knows the way home. It's been 2 years since that day in the auditorium. Daniel is now halfway through college, studying public policy of all things. He says he wants to make sure no one ever gets erased by a system again. I still keep that graduation program in a drawer, the one where his name was almost lost. Sometimes I take it out and run my fingers over the printed letters, remembering how the principal's voice trembled when he said them aloud. Every now and then, I get messages from old teachers or parents. They say things like, "Your son reminded us what integrity looks like," or "That boy has more courage than most adults I know." I smile when I read them, but I also remember how lonely those months were, how quiet our house became when no one believed him. One evening, while I was visiting campus, I saw Daniel sitting on a park bench, sharing his sandwich with a homeless man. They were laughing, 2 strangers finding warmth in the smallest act. That same navy scarf, the one that had become his quiet symbol, was now around the man's shoulders. When I asked Daniel about it later, he said, "It's just a scarf, Mom." But I figured he needed it more than I do. That's when I realized the real victory wasn't the scholarship, or the apology letters, or even the truth finally being known. It was that Daniel had walked through betrayal, humiliation, and injustice, and came out gentler, not harder. He'd learned that dignity isn't something anyone can take from you. It's something you choose to carry every day. I share this story not because it's extraordinary, but because it's possible for all of us to stand up quietly and let truth do its patient work. So if you've ever been overlooked, doubted, or wronged, hold steady. Your moment will come. Maybe not with applause, but with something better, peace. Because in the end, justice isn't loud. It's a whisper that never stops echoing.